Hello and welcome to this watch review. Today I've got something a bit different for you. This is a budget dive watch I found on eBay, and it appears to be a clone of an SKX. Now on the left of the screen I'm going to show you the original listing. As you can see, I got this watch for $100 plus $20 shipping. I did actually buy this baby blue variant as well as a green dial version, which is still in the packaging here, and a black dial as well. And there we go. So I'll be sharing some thoughts on all of the colors as we go, but the main focus is going to be this blue one, as I haven't really looked at many blue watches before. Now, the first thing you might notice is it is referred to as a Sharkey SKX 007. Now, there is a company out there called Heimdaller, which do a Sharkey style of watch, or they call it a Sharkey watch. Now, this is not it, as far as I'm aware. So essentially, this is another Seiko SKX homage, not related to that Heimdaller model, and actually cheaper as well at just $100 plus $20 shipping. It did come from China. Because I bought 3 watches, they were actually able to offer me FedEx shipping, which only took about a week. And yeah, there we have it. So in this video, I'll review this watch. I'll make some comparisons with the original Seiko SKX, which I've got here. And the reason I bought it was I was in the middle of starting to modify Seikos like this, and I ended up settling for a Seiko 5 Sport as my first mod. But then I thought, actually, you know what, if I can get the movement, if I can get a sapphire crystal, if I can get a case for a relatively cheap price, even if it isn't a genuine Seiko, but all the parts fit this, I can actually use this as a base watch for future mods. So that is what I'm intending to do. But yes, I thought it deserved a little video as it is, because people may be wondering what they're actually like. Now, firstly, you may have noticed this cool box. Now, this is like a flight case style watch box that all 3 were delivered in. Nice loud click there to close it. This is unbranded. I have 3 of these boxes now because I bought the 3 watches, and I'm actually really impressed with this. This is dead simple, but actually it makes for a really nice little watch box, and it's super secure, and you can fit 2 watches in one of them. So that is a plus point straight away for actually having this foam inserts kind of egg box style, but actually the watch is really quite secure in there. And especially, I guess, if they're shipping them around the world, it makes sense rather than just a cardboard box. So I wasn't expecting that, so that's a point in its favor straight away. Let's put that to one side. Now, the watch itself, it is a very close copy of a Seiko in terms of its general size and aesthetics. So if we start with the case itself, the only obvious places I could tell the differences was, firstly, the size of these lugs. So from here to here is slightly larger than the original Seiko SKX 007. If we look at, I might need to zoom in for this. Let's have a look at the finishing on the edges there. And as you can see, the Seiko has this beveled edge that goes all the way to the tip pretty much, whereas this one kind of stops halfway. The quality of the finishing is definitely better on the Seiko compared to the, well, let's call this the Shark Diver, because it's not really a Sharky, even though that's what they're calling it on eBay. The case profiles are pretty much identical, actually. You'd struggle to tell. Sorry, I'll try and put them perhaps like this so you can see. No, that's not going to work. If we hold them sort of like this, the lug to lug is just about the same. The bezels are a bit different. I'll come to the bezels in a minute, but the general side views are very similar. Another difference is the shoulders here. The crown guards are a little bit sort of shallower of an angle on the Shark diver compared to the Seiko, which goes down a bit lower. Generally, the finishing and quality of the case is better on the Seiko, of course, but let's not forget that this watch costs 3 times the price of this one, and that is on the rubber strap as well. Now, looking at the obvious other features, we have, of course, the bezel. Now, the bezels are more of a sort of sub-style where they've got these drilled kind of patterns going all the way around to form a single row of like pyramid shapes on there. Sorry, I can't seem to get it in focus. There we go. They are quite large compared to an actual Submariner bezel, so yeah, I wouldn't call this a very close copy to that, but it's definitely a different style to the double row pyramid kind of conical bezels that we get on Seiko SKXs. I actually prefer this style of bezel, the look of it, I actually prefer on the Blue watch. However, the action is quite different. Let's have a listen. I can feel it sort of jumping about there and not being very defined. I mean, there's never really any backplay in these kind of bezels because of the way it ratchets, but I feel like the clicks are very uneven, it feels crunchy. Yeah, it's really poor quality for a bezel, but then again, it is a cheap watch. The Seiko, on the other hand, same 120 click, but now it is sort of clicking properly as it should and nice and even. Yeah, quite defined. Not the best bezel in the world, of course, but still pretty decent. So quite a simple mod I did actually, and if you look at my Seiko mod channel, my videos on my Seiko mod videos, should I say, I converted my Seiko 5 Sport project to have a 60 click bezel. I actually did the same on this black one. This black one I've been sort of taking apart and having a look around to see what I can and can't do with it. Now, just changing it to 60 click by removing one of the springs is actually a really good improvement on this model, and that is, you can do that exactly in the same way as you would on an SKX. If you have a look at my video, you'll be able to see that. Now, moving on then, the dial. Now, it might actually be clear on the black one. You can see we have quite nice lume, and I'm going to show you a lume shot later. We've got these hands, which are sort of similar to the Seiko 5 and Seiko SKX hands. We've got this red tipped second hand. Well, half of it's red and it's got the white little balance on the end. Generally, I think the dial layout is quite nice. It's clearly a Submariner style, Rolex style. It's got the little shark logo, which is kind of unobtrusive. It looks a little cheap because obviously nobody knows what the brand this is, but still it is, you know, it could have been much worse. They could have put some terrible logo or even worse, a name on there or something. We have some printing at the bottom which says Divers Professional 200 meters. It is supposedly water resistant to 200 meters, but yes, I probably wouldn't go diving with this watch as my key time source, as it is a really cheaply made dive watch anyway. But as a watch on its own in this style, I think it looks quite good. The blue dial is really light blue. It's actually a lot lighter blue than I was expecting. It looks a bit flat and sort of plasticky. It doesn't have any real sunburst effect or anything. It's quite a matte finish. Little less legible than the black dial, but perhaps a more interesting color for some. We've got the matching sort of light blue chapter ring going around there as well. All the numerals, the markers are applied with these silver surrounds. We've got a date. Let me just unscrew the crown actually, because let's not forget, this is an NH36 movement, supposedly. Although I don't believe this is a genuine Seiko movement. I think it's just a copy of the movement as well as a copy of the watch. But as you can see, it does have hand winding and stop seconds or hacking. The date, oops, Let's go back a step. The date is in, I believe, French and English, and everything seems to work actually quite well. And I've set all three watches and tested them over a day or so in terms of their accuracy, and they were well within my expectations for what I would expect a Seiko to be accurate to. I think they were within about 10 seconds of each other and about 10 or 15 seconds of the actual time after 24 hours, which I was pretty pleased with actually. So no concerns with the movement running. The crown winding feel is pretty good, just like you'd expect from Seiko as well. Nothing too special, but it works. The crown does screw down, which is something that the new Seiko 5 Sport doesn't have, and I guess this helps with its water resistance, although I'm sure this watch is not ISO certified as a diver's watch, even though it has divers printed on the dial. Now, moving around, I'll talk about the bracelet in a second. Let's have a look at the case back. The case back has got the Shark logo again and some text. It's just got some sort of slightly unusual message on the back. It says 200 meters water resistance and so on. It does refer to the Sharkey diver's name on there. I know the actual Heimdallr Sharkies do have a similar case back, but that, along with the Shark logo on the dial and the crown, do kind of spoil it a little bit. Also in the bracelet we have the Shark logo on the clasp, just there. The bracelet itself is not too dissimilar to the standard Seiko 5 Sport bracelet, if you get that on the bracelet. It is a little more jingly jangly and a bit cheaper. It has hollow end links, just like the Seiko does as well. And yeah, they do rattle around on the wrist, and it's not a good bracelet basically. But then again, the Seiko one isn't either. The clasp appears, when you first look at it, you think, oh wow, is that a milled clasp? But actually no, it's not milled. It's just really flat. So the way they've stamped it out kind of gives that milled appearance a little bit until you get to these points. And yeah, all the buckles and everything are a little bit loose and shaky. So yeah, not a great bracelet. It is wearable, and I'll show you a wrist shot in a second, but it's nothing special. You would probably want to swap this bracelet out in the first instance. So now, yes, let's have a wrist shot. So I have quite large wrists, and it worked in about 7 3/4 in inches and about 19.5 centimeters. The watch sits quite well on me, just like the SKX. It wears virtually the same. The wider lugs make it look a little bit larger, perhaps in some angles, but generally it's a good looking watch. Now, the bracelet is actually sized very large to begin with. Even for my large wrist, I had to remove 2 links, which is quite rare for me. But yeah, the fit is quite good when it's on the wrist, and I think you'll agree it looks all right. Definitely looks that it is worth at least $100. Now, let's have a look at the Lume. Now, this is quite interesting, and I'll see if I can do a little comparison here. There's the original Seiko, which is of course famous for its Lume, and here is the $100 third of the price eBay special. So I'm just going to charge them up for roughly the same amount of time using this loop I have, and the Seiko is one of the only watches in my collection, or the 2 Seikos I have, that actually shine quite clearly, even if I've got my lights on here in this room. So as you can see, nice bright Lume there. Let's do the same on the eBay watch. Now, interestingly, it has the same trait of having a reactive kind of a day wheel that reacts to UV light, whereas the date doesn't. I found that a little odd with the Seiko to begin with as well. So yeah, I would say there is decent Lume on there actually, because you can't always see the Lume on this camera in this fairly light room, but it definitely isn't quite as good as the standard Seiko. But yeah, nothing really to complain about. I've got much more expensive watches that have much poorer quality of lume there. Now, let's have a look at the movement. To do that, I'm going to just change the view a little bit and open up the black watch here, because I've already had this open before. Let's take a look. Now, as I was saying, I did use this black one to experiment a little bit to see what parts would fit in terms of aftermarket bezels and crystals and whatever. The one little trick I will show you is how to get the bezel off this, because if you end up buying one of these and you want to replace the bezel because it is a bit naff, this may save you a lot of hassle in trying to get it off. Because of the shape of the bezel, it's actually really sloped on the inside, so it's kind of hard to get in there. What I found is if you screw the crown in really tight and then actually use the crown as a bit of a lever, and the bezel pops straight off. So that's just a little trick, so that's how you get the bezel off. With the bezel off, it does look very much Seiko under here. We've got the same click spring, the same dimensions. An aftermarket bezel will fit on here and it will work way better than this standard one. Even a standard Seiko bezel on here will do a decent job. You can see I scratched this up a little bit in messing with it before. So let's put that to one side. Moving on to the case back. Yes, we've got this shark emblem. If I'm going to modify this, I would definitely try and remove all the logos, or at least replace the parts with the logos on, and then just use really the case and the movement and the crystal, because this is a sapphire crystal. It's a flat sapphire crystal, but it does, and I genuinely believe it is correct. It is a real sapphire crystal, as the feel of it is quite nice quality, especially if you pop it out, and I have done that with this one before. Now, let's try and get into the back of this. Hopefully my tool is already set up for this type of watch. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I've just loosened the case back with my tool there, and we can take a look inside. So, popping this out, here is the movement. Let's have a quick zoom in. So as you can see, this looks identical to the Seiko 5 Sport movement that I had, which was also I think that was a 4R36. I believe this is an NH36. Let's see if we can get to the, yeah, so we've got NH36A printed on there, 24 jewels, and a 118 marking or 811 marking, I'm not sure, or S2 maybe. Anyway, it's not signed Seiko anywhere, so I imagine that this is probably not a real Seiko movement. Somebody could probably clarify that in the comments if you've seen these watches or these kind of movements before. It could well be a copy of the movement, but it does still appear to be very much the same, identical really, and it does work quite well. Let's flip the camera back onto the blue watch. So there you have it. I think this is a reasonable purchase because of its price. Predominantly, $100 gets you a perfectly reasonable case. It gets you a sapphire crystal, and it gets you an NH36 style, at least, movement. Those are the parts I will be using from this watch to try and modify this and see how far I can go to make this look really quite nice. I think it looks okay now. The light blue is a bit too light for me. It's a bit too simple. And the key thing that bothers me is the bezel quality, the logos, and the bracelet. But the bracelet is a fairly easy fix, as most Seiko bracelets get thrown away in search for a better option straight away anyway. So I'm quite happy with this purchase. I think this will be a good starter watch for doing some modifications. But if you are genuinely considering just a cheap dive watch, that you can throw around a little bit and not worry too much about, especially with that sapphire crystal, I think this is a pretty solid option. As I said earlier, it does also come in green and black. The black one we saw getting the bezel off earlier. The green is much like the blue. It's a little lighter than you might expect. It's also very flat and not really reflective. That aids in the legibility of it, but it doesn't really make it look very special. This is how it comes completely packaged, and don't forget you do get that nice case as well. So that'll be it for this review. Let me know what you think. My plans are to modify this into something a bit more interesting, and I will of course share updates, so please like and subscribe, and we'll see how this matches up against a real Seiko once we are finished.